we can see the VisualDx screen, and I'm going to take you through some of the options on this page, and we're going to explore those possibilities. Let me begin, though, by taking you through a short PowerPoint and introducing you to VisualDx as a product. So what we are seeing here is a description of VisualDx. It's a clinical decision support system. It doesn't tell you what to diagnose your patients with, but it's an evidence-based system which is here to improve your therapeutic decisions and to help with patient safety. So it's an adjunct to your normal professional decision making. Within it, we have materials for patient education and to really help to speed up your throughput of patients and to help with the decisions that you make. It is very extensive. It is based on input from medical experts in each of their fields, and it is continually updated, so with new information contained within it and added to very frequently. So at present, we have over 4,000 diseases, and many of these are supported by images within this product. It is a very visual product, as you can tell here and from the name. Just as a point of layout, we're going to look at this in just a moment, and our introductory speaker also showed you these screens about the way that you can begin to enter a symptom or observation, or you can begin by choosing from a set of categories. On the side of the page as well, we can see some other menus that we're going to explore as well. As we go through these screens, what we're generally doing is we're working down the left-hand side of the page, and we're adding in the observations and the symptoms that we are observing within the patient. Often within these selections, you will see other selections. So the menus will give you access to diagrams of where rashes are occurring, for example, or explanations of particular terms, which can really be helpful. As we work towards a diagnostic decision, you can see that on the right-hand side, the findings that are observed are gathered up, and we can see that some of these are required findings, which are important. Often these are the ones that you enter at the beginning of your process. So we can see, for example, in this patient here, that they have a respiratory problem, they have chest pain, they have fever, it's developed acutely, and when I listen to the chest, I can hear crackles through auscultation. So this is the sort of process that we go through within VisualDx. So here is my patient. The patient has a fever, they're short of breath, they have a fast heart rate, and they have chest pain, and they have the crackles that I can hear with the stethoscope. And when I go to look at the diagnosis, these are the sorts of items that are displayed in the diagnostic list. We can see across the screen for this tab, which is the observations across all of the diagnoses, that we can see different sorts of diagnoses which are possible. We can see in this case, these ones are sympticons. They are summaries of symptoms for this particular patient. So based on this, we can really begin to think, well, what additional questions should I ask? What are the other sorts of observations that I need to make this a firmer diagnosis? One thing that we can also see is that as that colored bar at the top of the summary chain expands, it changes color. It moves from red through yellow and orange to green. And the green observation that we see there is really indicating that this is becoming a more specific diagnosis that we see on the page just here. I'm asking the patient further questions, and he's saying that he's giving up smoking, so he is using a vape tool at the moment really to help with that. And that he has to sit down because he has pains in his arms and his legs. So what do I do with this information? I can add this into the observations that I've already made. And if I enter information about his vaping and his use of an electronic cigarette, it might change the diagnoses that are indicated on the page. And one of the observations that is possible then is about this electronic nicotine delivery system that he's using, and that perhaps this is causing a problem. But for me, if I know about my current situation and that that perhaps we have some COVID infections in the community, we can perhaps see a balance between these two. Also, if I'm entering information about the arm and leg pain that he is experiencing, it might draw my observations and my diagnosis in a different direction. So it's not diagnosing the patient for you, but it is indicating that there are different sorts of possibilities. And this is really, I think, the purpose of these tools. On the screen at the moment, you can see two individual items, these sympticons, the summaries of symptoms. And if we're thinking about this product, it is a summary product. You're going to see summaries of diseases, the diagnostic questions that you can ask, and also later on the treatments and other steps that you may take. Let me move from these slides, though, to take you into the system itself. So here we can see VisualDx on the screen in front of us. And our first speaker took you to this page and gave you a very thorough tour. I'm going to hopefully add to the observations that he's made, so really to show you other things that you can do and other actions that you can perform, and perhaps some interesting details. On the screen at the moment, you can see the two options for beginning a diagnostic process by filling in a sign or a symptom. So we could be looking at fever, for example. We can take this as an observation, or we could also look at whether there are diseases which contain that particular word. So scarlet fever, for example, is a part of the list there. So we can begin here by typing something in, by making an entry and beginning our process of diagnosing a patient. We also have these differential builder elements that we see here. So as I choose that, we're beginning to see some observations, the chief complaint that is observed with this patient, and we could move down through that process. This is where we're going to go next, but before we do that, let me see and show you some of the other things that are on the page that we see here. We've seen in the illustrations that VisualDx is not just a program which is available for PC and for Mac. You can also have it as part of as an app on your mobile device. This is a part of the process that you can follow to make that happen. So on an iPad or an iPhone or other device, if you are using VisualDx, this is how we can register, and we can actually download the app from there. We can find some public health and education information from here. So this is a way of really transferring local information to you and telling you some new items that are available to you. We also have the possibility of selecting a language if we wish. Here it is. So if you would like to use a different language, it's certainly possible from here. And it's a good idea to select your region. I'm speaking to you from Australia, so I'm in the Southern and Western Pacific. You can select from the choices here to select your particular region. And it does have an influence on your outcome because your location, obviously, there are diseases which are more endemic to your location. So we're beginning that process by choosing your region. Over on the side of the page, there are other menus. I will take you through those at the end. Let's make the first step. Let's have a look at an eye disease. We're going to have a look through ophthalmology. My patient has eye lesions. We're seeing the menus that result from that first step just here. So we can see on the screen at the moment some information about the patient that we can change if we wish. Perhaps the person is younger, perhaps a different gender. And again, this will change the menus that we see depending on the diseases that we are selecting. Through the page here, we can see that this first observation, eye lesion, is required at the moment. It has that green mark next to it. If it is a required part of the observations, then it becomes really the central part that needs to be observed. It's going to eliminate other diseases and problems which do not have this particular characteristic. On the screen in the center here, we can see these illustrations here that are going to lead us through the process of making a selection about the type of ophthalmological problem that is observed. So we're making a choice, and we can see that for this choice and for many of the other choices, we have other choices and menus below the one we can see on that first page. I'm just confirming that choice here, and you can see that it changes color as we make that confirmatory choice. Moving down through the menu, we can see this choice, which is indicating whether it is only one eye or both of the eyes which is affected. It's both in this case. What was the onset of the findings? How long has this patient had this problem? So we can see, for my observation, it was acute, so within a few days. We can see the options that are here on the screen that really guide us through these processes. For the eye signs or symptoms, you're going to see a menu like this. And for this menu, you can see that there are other menus below. And so we can see if we wanted to add further detail, we can do that from here. For some of these choices, we can see that there are guiding elements, these small eye icons that will give you a little bit of a description of that problem to disambiguate that choice. I'm making some choices here really to add to this process and to show how we can choose from these listings. Further down the page, we can see this menu that we see here about negative findings. Negative findings can be very diagnostic. If you expected to see something and you did not observe it, this is really what these negative findings are about. So if we were drawn in that direction, we could perhaps say we expected to see a rash or at least some inflammation of the skin on the face, and we did not find that. For any of these menus, though, this last one and the one that we see also at the top of the page, this is also important. How do we take these processes in a different direction? We can add additional findings in addition to the ones that we have observed. And because we originally chose to look at ophthalmology, we were really guided through a process of evaluating an eye disease. This was a part of that process. We've begun that process, and what we might want to do then is to look at the differential list that results from those observations that we see here. And so really to spend a small amount of time on this page, what we first see is all of the diagnoses that match the entered criteria. We can see the criteria at the top of the page. We can see them as a list as we see them here. The way that they are organized on the page is based on the possibility of that particular disease or problem being manifest in this particular patient. And as I hold my cursor over that individual item, you can see that it shows up, and we can see how it matches with the findings that we have entered. So this is based on probability, based on those AI characteristics that we were talking about when we described this particular product. Within this display as well, we can see some of the important indicators that we can see here, that some of these diseases and problems are associated with travel. Some of these are emergencies and life-threatening. We can see the ones which are outlined in red, for example, on the page. If this was a problem or a question that involved a rash or an observation of the skin, we can also see the different menus that we're here that are to do with looking at people's skin tones or colors or textures and really bringing those sorts of issues into play. It does not apply in this case. Eyes are the same. Through the other tabs, though, in this first tab where it says Consider First, we're going to be looking at the most common and important diagnoses. So we can really begin to divide these off. We're looking at all of them first, but we're going to be showing the most common ones under this tab. The ones in that second tab are the ones that are less common and rarer. It doesn't mean that they are not the ones which we are observing. It's just that they perhaps require more observations, more questions really to come to that particular choice. Through the pages, we can see the ones which are emergencies. You can see that triangle that we see there, which is indicating that issue, and which ones are infectious and therefore may need particular barrier nursing or special observations if we think it's one of these. and some that are associated with drugs or other medications. Through the page then, one thing that we can definitely see is that none of these diseases indicated here has a green banner at the top. None of these are complete, so we need to continue to gather information, to gather up information about this patient and their problems. To be able to begin to assess this, I can move from looking at photos to looking at those symptoms, the summaries of symptoms that we are observing. So to look across this list and maybe to see some of the other questions and observations that are necessary, and maybe to begin to put some of these aside because this is not what I'm seeing for this particular patient. I'm asking the patient some other questions, and they've said, recently I had a fever. So I'm going to type that in, and we're going to select fever, but you can notice that there were additional special types of fever that were listed there if this was a necessary choice. He said because he had had the fever and the other physician that he had visited briefly hadn't been able to find the problem, that he'd been given antibiotics. So you can see the sorts of antibiotics that were perhaps given down through the page here. And if I knew more, I would make a more specific selection. So we're adding to this list, we're making these observations, and we're able then to move through and perhaps to see whether this has made a change to the sorts of diagnoses which are possible. Definitely, it has reorganized them on the screen, and to be able to find out more, I'm beginning to choose the one that seems to be potentially the one that might be the issue. I can begin to read and look at that particular problem, and I can note that this is rare. So I may need to go back and look at more detail and maybe ask more questions later on. But from here, what I can do is I can maybe make some assessment of the sorts of problems that I see with this patient and with their eyes. And if I want to see more details, I can open up that full article that we see here. We can see that this is a potentially life-threatening emergency, even though it's rare. So this is important. I want to completely explore this issue. The person that I'm looking at is an adult, but we can see some detail here. If this was a patient which was a children or an infant. On the side of the page here, we can see the summary of this particular disease or problem. So if I wanted to move down and look at the detail for that patient, I would be able to come down and see the summary that we see here. So this could be a really good way of making a decision about whether this was the issue that I observed. And I'm beginning to see too some of the illustrations, the items that we see here, because this is a visual product. So the photos, the diagrams and summaries that are present on the screen. So as I move down through this page, I'm making a decision, maybe looking more closely at the patient and maybe seeing some other opportunities. What other diseases and problems have similar sorts of patterns of symptoms. If we wanted to look at a differential, we could move away from this one and we could move off to a different disease and see whether this was better suited. If I wanted, though, to go ahead to use a further drug for this problem, I would be able to click behind here and look at the information that's there. Most of these elements are referenced, as we can see on the page here. For any of you that have access to UpToDate, it is possible to move from this screen into UpToDate. So by clicking onto the link here, I would be able to open up a new window and access your subscription and move through and see further information about the details of diagnosis and treatment, but also to see further research options, which are here. On the page on the side as well, we can also begin to see these illustrations and diagrams and pictures. And if I open up any of these pictures, you can see the great deal of detail which is available in that case. So we've had a quick look across a diagnostic process and seeing how this product works, and really seeing how we can move through this process to find some information from this evidence-based diagnostic tool that we have in front of us. To begin again, choose from the menu and select where it says Start Over. Through the rest of the menu that we see on the side of the page here, we can see some video tutorials which take you through the process of building a differential, just as I have on the screen at the moment. So if you want to explore that when you have access, this is certainly a really interesting possibility. It gives you lots of different examples, looking at many different sorts of disease states and showing you how this product can really help. There are frequently asked questions that are also part of that menu. How does it work? What are the sorts of parameters that are important within these diagnostic steps? And then one other approach can be, if we are moving from this menu on the side, we can actually look at the lists of diseases and problems that are a part of this product. So we can assess them alphabetically, and we're able to see that through the pages here, that often we have different choices for children, for adults, from the side of the page there. And then we also have access to the main page for VisualDx and information about the company that it comes from. The company is based in Boston in the United States, and it is definitely used across the world to great effect. So for me, that was my short demonstration of VisualDx. The PowerPoint that I used at the beginning has further information inside it, and I think that Flysheet and our wonderful distributors will allow that to be passed around if you are interested in observing it and finding out more. Well, that's almost it for me. I hope that that was useful and interesting, and that I've piqued your interest, and that you're going to want to try out this wonderful product. I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this point. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Please. Thank you.